Oh, we lost someone. Louay, welcome. All right. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. Welcome to Web Summit. Welcome to Lisbon, both of you. Very interesting topic, moonshots. Quick round of introductions before we start. Louay, why don't you start?
Co-founder and CEO of Quanergy. We make the LiDARs that you've seen on self-driving cars, but there are many more applications.
That was very brief. Marcus.
Yes, hi, I'm Marcus Shingles. I'm the CEO of the XPrize Foundation. So we're a leading nonprofit that sets up large global incentive competitions that we leverage with prize purses of 10, 20, $30 million, strictly in the moonshot business. So trying to crowdsource from the world 10x improvements over innovations that will solve humanity's grandest challenges.
Great, thank you. Quick introduction for me. My name is Robin. I'm a journalist, Tech.eu, covering European startups innovation mostly these days, but talking to a lot of entrepreneurs and investors for the last 12 years now. So I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs. I don't think I've seen too many tackling really, really big problems of our time. In fact, most entrepreneurs that I've met have been doing really interesting things with a big market, but not necessarily solving the big problems of our age, which is climate change, education, agriculture, healthcare, really, really big sectors that are very, very hard to disrupt. So they usually go and build a mobile game or a new social network or whatever, not necessarily focusing on big problems. Do you agree with that statement? Do you think entrepreneurs are not ambitious enough in general?
So some of the world's biggest problems are also some of the world's biggest business opportunities right now, but there's a lot of big grand challenges that don't have a lot of commercial incentive right now. So what we try to do is we realize there's this burgeoning ecosystem of inventors and innovators like the world's never seen before. You've got ecosystems around the world from Tel Aviv to Berlin to Brooklyn to Silicon Valley, Silicon Beach. All these areas that are breeding these innovators and entrepreneurs that have access to technology to do things only big government or big industry could do a decade or so ago. So we have moonshot factories all over the place. And you're right, a lot of the entrepreneurs and a lot of the commercial incentives that entrepreneurs follow are going to be in spaces and domains that are lucrative. What we try to do at XPrize is we think if we can incentivize the crowd to get that innovator who's in their day job of maybe running a startup to use a certain technology for commercial purposes, could we incentivize them on their nights and weekends to also put in as a responsible citizen to solve an XPrize? As a nonprofit, they keep all the intellectual property. We just try to gamify the innovation process and ask the world of entrepreneurs in their excess capacity, i.e. their nights and weekends, while you're working on some great tech to change the business world, there is implications to using that moonshot thinking to solve some of the world's biggest problems. And it turns out that you got to give a lot of credit to the entrepreneurs out there because they do. They will spend their excess capacity, their 10% of their time over the course of 2 or 3 years that we run these competitions to solve some really big problems in a domain that they have some technology expertise. So I have more confidence in that ecosystem to deliver on big problems.
Great. Well, Louay, you're a serial entrepreneur.
Yeah.
You've been around the block a few times. Do you find it difficult as an entrepreneur to think big? Because everyone thinks they think big, but that's not necessarily so, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, this is my 4th startup, Quanergy. We are doing something that's quite disruptive. Generally, we find that the higher the risk and the more you go for an effort that sounds challenging, almost unfeasible initially, the more you can impact society and the future of living. So in our case, we have smart sensors with artificial intelligence, and that's applied to really all aspects of future living. You've heard about autonomous vehicles or self-driving cars, but that's just the beginning. The way your future is going to look, you would be amazed if I described to you the future. In terms of the smart home, the moment you walk in your home, everything gets customized for you automatically. Smart cities, how cities will avoid accidents, improve traffic flow, and smart perimeters, industrial automation, delivery drones to your home, as well as mapping everything from urban areas to rainforests, and as well as the ocean floor, to really have an impact on the environment and avoid negative consequences. So when you have a vision like this, it's challenging. It takes lots of hard-working and risk-taking people to make it happen. But when it comes together, it's really, it changes the way we're going to be living.
Cool. Well, Marcus, I made the assumption that everyone knows XPrize. Maybe I shouldn't have. Maybe I'll let you explain kind of what's behind. You mentioned that it's a nonprofit, but what's the model? What's the intention? And what's the future look like for XPrize?
Yeah, so the model, so XPrize has been around for about 15 years. The very first XPrize was a $10 million XPrize to do a moonshot. It was to put a private space flight up into suborbit and back down, which had never been done before. The private space industry didn't exist at that point. And so Peter Diamandis, the executive chairman of XPrize, announced the $10 million XPrize to anyone that could put a spaceship up into suborbit and back down, basically invent private space flight. And that XPrize was won by Burt Rutan, and Richard Branson was there at the winning ceremony buying the intellectual property. That he now runs Virgin Galactic with Spaceship 2. Spaceship 1 was the Moonshot that won the XPrize, which that is currently hanging in the Smithsonian Museum next to Charles Lindbergh's flight that he used across the Atlantic. So ever since then, the model's been used to, could we crowdsource humanity, society, not ask what people's resumes look like or what school they went to or what innovation background they have, but just literally put out $10, $20 million prize purses and ask the world to come solve them. And those prizes are based on 10x improvements over anything that's currently out there. So we've used the model now in education. We're doing a global learning XPrize, $15 million. This is to educate 4,000 illiterate children in Tanzania by crowdsourcing the world for software development that will teach an illiterate child to a third grade proficiency in reading, writing, and basic math. If you can do that, you'll win $15 million. We're down to the finals of 5 teams. But the goal is that if we put these behavioral science instruments together that basically say, how can we get the world out there to create moonshots to solve big problems, it's really dressing up the methodology like a competition. That's a little bit more of the construct in which you put it out to the world. Here's a competition, people like to compete. And in doing so, you can generate a lot of teams, thousands of teams, that will try to rapidly experiment and innovate on a moonshot that otherwise would not see any innovation at all. So at XPrize, we only focus on where there's voids. Here's a big problem like oceans that aren't getting solved today by traditional problem solvers, government or industry. There's no profit motive. But we need a moonshot. We need some breakthroughs, and it's just not happening. So when we find that blind spot that's not happening, we then try to take it to the crowd, to the world community, to say, can someone solve this with a moonshot? And we'll leverage it with $10, $20 million. And what typically happens is these things run 3 or 4 years, and over 3 or 4 years, like the original XPrize to put a spacecraft up in the suborbit, that was $10 million. Those teams over 3 or 4 years, over 7 years for that competition, invested $100 million collectively to try to win a $10 million prize. So the economics work in the favor of philanthropy to generate results. You pay for a winner, but also generate a lot of R&D that you wouldn't normally see happening around a particular moonshot.
So I guess you could say even the winners, even those who don't win, kind of win, because they invent different things in different fields.
Yeah, well, you just had a group talking about winning, and if we do a competition well, we learn more from the failures, so to speak, than we do from the winner, because you can observe and experiment over 5 years of a lot of attempts to solve something. And yes, someone will come up and hopefully win the XPrize, but even the dozens or thousands or hundreds, whatever the number is, of experiments, you learn a lot from that whole exercise. So it's a theory of change on how to solve problems using more progressive contemporary methods like crowdsourcing, game mechanics, incentive competition, prize theory. It's just a progressive lens on how to do social impact.
Louay, when you started Quanergy, Was that a logical result of your previous career, that just going to that field, or did you identify a huge problem that you really wanted to solve? How did that
It's
happen?
actually both. I did my PhD at Columbia 25 years ago on 3D sensing using lasers. I did not use that particular application. I used, silicon photonics in telecom and solar and so on, but I did not use the sensing aspect till I identified the need in self-driving vehicles. Now, of course, when we first started Quanergy, and back then, believe it or not, 5 years ago, when we talked about self-driving cars, the space was not hot. The area sounded outlandish, and when we went to investors, they looked at us as if we were science fiction people. First we bootstrapped. The company was in my home garage. We believed in the vision and the idea. We had a compelling and viable business model. We had to prove it first. We did it on our own dime. And when we had the proof of concept, then we had believers. Most moonshot ideas are the ones that people think could not solve problems that people thought were not solvable. And sometimes you just have to do a proof of concept to make the point. But from there, we expanded. We expanded well beyond self-driving cars. We saw that the whole concept of smart awareness was one that applies in every aspect of living. Whether you're in your car, at home, in the office, walking down the street, or really, hiking and discovering areas, or even scuba diving. And we're applying it in all of these areas. It's been incredibly exciting, and the success speaks for itself. We went from not being seen as unfundable to being worth multiple $1 billion now in valuation today.
Good. Going back to XPrize, how do you select which problem to tackle next? Is it guided by a corporate that might sponsor one of the competitions, or how does that work?
So we have, every year, we have people that approach the foundation and suggest that we take on a big problem with the XPrize model, that we put out a global competition. At XPrize, we've got
So you're saying it's not the other way around. You don't go to the companies and say, this is a big problem we should be tackling. Can you help us? It's the other way around.
Yeah, it's the other way around. I mean, people, it's a very progressive way on taking on social problems today, which is let's crowdsource the world to solve these. And the world's getting more powerful. The individual now has access to computing power. All of us do as individuals. The same computing power that big government or big industry had 20 years ago. So now as an individual, I have access to artificial intelligence, or 3D printers, or biotechnology and gene editing, or blockchain technology, or CRISPR. So you have this innovation renaissance happening, and most people are starting to realize that as a company, the smartest people in the world, they don't work for you. They're somewhere out there in the 7 billion, 8 billion people getting connected in the world. So there's this emergence of this new asset class of problem solvers that should have us all somewhat optimistic, which is we've got a lot of big problems in the world, but fortunately, we've got a lot of individuals that can solve problems that only government or industry could solve 10, 20 years ago. So that's fact, that's what's happening, and that whole world is getting connected via the internet. You got half the planet today connected, 3.6 billion people, and within the next 7 to 10 years, you're going to have the whole planet connected, or the vast majority of the people on the planet will be connected to the internet. So think about that for a second in that landscape. Every one of us connected, and having access as individuals to technology and computing power that, again, only big government, big industry had 20 years ago. So we get approached by NGOs, government, and others that realize that the crowd is becoming extremely powerful. Traditional problem solvers are not solving problems. So it's a new mechanism to problem solve. And we have a vetting process to your question, which is every year we have a portfolio of groups that will come to us, whether it's oceans or education or healthcare, or we just did a prize on democracy, new voting technology using the blockchain, or the government of China approached us about doing clean air technology. Again, areas that aren't getting enough innovation because all the startups out there are working on commercial ventures, and that's not lucrative yet. So we have a vetting process every year. It's called our Visioneers process, where we take 5 or 6 concepts, we put teams around them, we put a prominent individual in the space that owns the domain, that presents an impact proposal to a group of investors that are philanthropic investors that are basically vetting the concepts based on the proposal to see which ones could potentially work in this model in an optimized way. And that's our vetting process. And we just did it 3 weeks ago. It's our annual summit. And we had Alzheimer's, early detection Alzheimer's, as a concept that we are confident that if you put this out to the crowd, that you will find a needle in the haystack. You'll find an individual out there that can experiment in a way that creates a moonshot. The other concepts we had were one around democracy and voting, clean air pollution. The government of Singapore did one with us, a design concept around cybersecurity. And the government of Chile did one with us around zero waste mining. Is there technology out there that you can take a ton of ore and get copper out of it and not create the environmental footprint that you would that today's mining technology uses? And that's a good example. You put that out to the crowd and there'll be a biologist that comes in with the gene editing of a bacteria that can put on the ore that will dissolve, you'll come up with those moonshots if you get that diversity of experimentation through the crowd model, and that's how we vet it.
It's a great model. Clock is ticking very quickly. I'm going to take some questions from Slido, from the audience. First one, will large corporations ever, that was actually going to be my next question. Will large corporations ever be as innovative as startups? Like, what's the role of corporations in this landscape that you just described?
I think there's a big difference between the way startups operate and the way big corporations operate. Big corporations usually start off being very innovative, but then they become complacent. We find that people who are eager to innovate and change the world, we have no problem hiring them. We're in Silicon Valley. People tell me, how can you hire someone instead of having them go to Google or Apple? We have no problem hiring the talented, innovative, enthusiastic people who want to change the world. And just to give you a quick example, I mean, LiDAR that you see on the Google car is that big. We made it this small by making it based on silicon with no moving parts. And the future looks like this. A chip that can fit in your clothing, in your cell phone, all over, in every object. We're enabling the smart IoT where all objects talk to each other. And that's something that no large company can do or has done.
Great. One last question really quick. Do you think that XPrize will eventually replace funding rounds for startups? Could it?
So, will XPrize replace funding rounds for startups? The model is, if you're a startup and you have an investor that might invest in you, we play to that market. So we'll launch an XPrize as a nonprofit. We'll launch this big XPrize. So if you're a startup and you have an investor, you'll call up your investor and say, you know how we were thinking about getting into the healthcare moonshot business or the space moonshot business? XPrize just launched the global competition, and I, as an engineer, think I have the intellectual capital to solve this. You, as my investor, why don't you see how I do in this XPrize competition? If I make it into the top 100, it credentializes me as an entrepreneur that you should be investing in me. So a lot of our model helps entrepreneurs justify with their investors that they should be invested in. We have a $30 million Google Lunar XPrize right now. Google, Larry Page is on our board of trustees. They've launched this $30 million Google Lunar XPrize. It's been running for 9 years. It's to put a robot on the moon. And all of those teams that are competing, and we're down to the 5 finalists, a team from Israel, Japan, the US, and India. And all of them are in situations where their investors were waiting to see if XPrize vetted them in a way that credentialized that they actually have what it takes to do well in this domain. So in a way, we're already working with the venture capitalist world by just helping create pipeline that they can come and vet real contenders for doing these types of moonshots.
Great. We are already out of time. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for the discussion. It was really interesting. Round of applause for these gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.